I've asked.
Do you hear me now?
You do. Is that Mr. Dahl?
It's Bob Dahl. I have no questions at this time for the witness.
Thank you. And I'll double back also to David and Catherine Price, if they're now on, and confirm whether they have any questions for this witness.
We're good, thank you.
Thank you. And did you see anyone else, or was that it?
I believe that was it.
Thank you for catching that. So does the board have any questions?
I think Dick's on.
Dick, you're muted.
There you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Scott, I start with the acknowledgement that, at least speaking for myself, I look at you as the expert in the field. So my questions are more about the property itself. I want to go back to a question that was asked, and I just wanted to see if I understand the answer. Several times you use the expression, the soils are suitable generally. When you refer to generally, does that mean the type of property itself and overall, or is generally meant to be the geography within the overall property?
It really goes to our observations of the soil types, the groundwater conditions, the rock depth, the limiting conditions for a system, and generally across the site, where we looked, those conditions looked good.
When you use the expression "it looked good," most of us are lay people. Can you put a little bit of flesh on that to explain to what would look bad? If good is good, how would you qualify bad or characterize bad?
So, for example, for stormwater filtration, you need at least 2 feet to a limiting zone below the depth where the bottom of the system is proposed. So you have to have good materials below that. Good meaning the textures are suitable, the infiltration properties are suitable, and those infiltration properties need to be 0.1 inch per hour or higher. And so those are 2 examples of what I mean when I say good or suitable.
Is there any part of what you looked at that you would say, I have a concern about the following? That maybe, yeah, it's sort of on the 50-50 edge of suitability or not?
Yeah, there were test pit locations that those conditions appeared unsuitable, and we call them out in our reports, and we say avoid those. So yes, there are some locations.
Within the locations that you said are suitable, within those locations, was there any ambivalence on your part professionally, in which is that if you had to choose between yay or nay, you decided to go with yay, but maybe with reservations?
No.
Put yourself in our position, both as a township and then as residents and concerned citizens. Knowing what you know, and you're based on your expertise, what should be our biggest concern about this whole area of discussion?
Well, can you be more specific? Are you talking what area of discussion are you talking about?
The suitability of the ground for the functions that you've described.
Okay. So, for example, for a wastewater disposal system, I would not. I would say you want to be vigilant in making sure that certain things are followed. Number one, that whoever evaluates these, and I'm registered and I'm qualified to evaluate it, is qualified to evaluate it, and what they do is in accordance with the DEP requirements. So there's requirements for certain kinds of testing, and certainly you want, once the testing has shown that the area is suitable, you want the system to be designed properly in accordance with the standards that are there for that kind of a system. And then you want to make sure that the system is properly constructed. And so as long as those things occur, the system should function properly.
Is there any reason for residents, the township, and concerned citizens to be concerned that that those issues will not be dealt with the way you just described it?
I have no reason to believe that.
And is there, I want to sort of project, let's assume it's hypothetically 10 years from now, 15 years from now, not being familiar, obviously from a technical point of view about soils, can the texture of soils change over time? And if so, what risk does that portend under these circumstances?
Well, as long as there's not, soil textures should not change over time. I mean, a sand is a sand, a clay is a clay. And so provided that you find materials that have the proper infiltration capacity and the proper textures, those things should not change. And the design of the system is such that there's a lot of conservative factors put in there, so that a system is basically over-designed. I mean, they're going to put probably much more system in there than you could actually use to fit the amount of wastewater into the ground. So I guess my point being is that no, textures, soils should not change. They've been there for tens of thousands of years, and they've developed to what they are.
No more questions. Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Pomerantz. Mr. Wolf, do you have any questions?
Yes, a couple. What is the water table in the northwest corner of the property where you have your disposal area? What did you find the water table depth to be at?
As I recall, we found a range of depths, and generally, if you're close to, in a valley where a stream may be, you'll find groundwater.
This is away from the stream. I'm talking about the corner area where your disposal area is.
I'm just trying to explain to you the context of what I'm about to tell you. So, in an area close to a stream, or a lower area topographically, the depth to water is going to be more shallow. And as you go up a hill, it's generally going to get deeper. So we found a range of groundwater depths from about 4 to 16 feet. And
in the northwest corner, what did you find?
that depth, that's what I'm talking about.
So you found a range of 4 to 16 feet in the corner of your disposal area. Okay, then you mentioned something, excuse me?
I'm sorry, I just would like to define what you mean by corner. I'm talking about the area that we evaluated, which was many, many acres, and it actually did extend.
No, I'm asking you specifically for the corner where you have two disposal areas, one off of 926 and one off of the corner of South New Street and West Pleasant Grove Road.
Sure.
And for the one at West Pleasant Grove Road and South New Street, that corner property, which is the northwest corner, what was the water table there? Only that site. That's all I care about right now.
Yeah, it ranged from the very low portion of that area, from about 4 feet, up to the higher portions of the site of that area to about 16 feet.
Okay, and do you have that in your report so that we can see that and document it?
Yes.
Can you tell me, can you reference where it is?
Sure, let me look it up for you, if you don't mind.
I don't mind, I need to know.
And I believe I testified to this last time we spoke, but it is...
You did. But it wasn't 16 feet.
Yeah. Page 7, section 5 of the March 2017 report says boring OH1 was drilled to a depth of about 44.3 feet and had a static water level of approximately 16.12 feet. Boring OH2 was drilled to a depth of about 33 and had a static water level of approximately 4.3. There was another well with 12 feet. So I can't recall if I said 12 or 16, but generally on the higher areas, it was more than 10 feet.
And so if I look on your document on page 7, I can find the exact location of those borings and what the water table was at them
Yes.
for that area. Is that correct?
The locations we drilled, you can find those water levels.
In the northwest corner. Okay, the other thing you mentioned was the installation of wells. And I don't know if I misheard you, but are you putting in any wells on site?
No. I think the context of that was when I was asked what will need to be done to further evaluate this if and when it goes to the DEP's purview. And that would include installation of wells to evaluate more the depth of water and
Okay.
the properties.
I get that. What is the value of on-site disposal for a property like this?
The value, can you be more specific?
Yes, what are the environmental benefits for having on-site disposal?
Environmental benefits. Well, soils are wonderfully created so that they, for example, take out pathogens. That's why many people have septic systems in their backyards, and if the soils are appropriately tested, these systems can function and not allow the pathogens and other things that are in the wastewater. It basically treats it. The other beneficial thing about drip irrigation is that you get some benefit to crops, for example, or grass, and in that it uptakes the nitrogen, the grass cover or whatever kind of vegetative cover there is.
Anything on water balance?
Well,
Water recharge?
yeah, I mean, it's that site, has probably has a good recharge rate, likely. So whether you put the wastewater in there or you don't, you're still going to have a sustained water table that feeds streams. But it doesn't hurt to have a system that puts it back in from once it's taken out.
What's the current regulation on that site that allows us what type of system?
Well, there are a variety of types of systems that can be permitted in Pennsylvania. Our evaluation was specific to, it ended up being specific to drip irrigation.
What types of systems does DEP allow under our current regulation at this time of the hearing?
Well, you can have a drip irrigation system, you can have a spray irrigation system, you can have a subsurface trench type, bed type system.
So it's regulated for on-site only at this time, correct?
Maybe I'm misinterpreting your question. I thought you said what kinds of, I was interpreting your question as what kinds of systems can you have approved for on-site disposal? Is that your question?
My question is, with DEP and the regulation currently, is it only permitted at this time and designated for on-site disposal under our current regulation right now?
I really can't give you any more information than I already have.
So have you evaluated what kind of systems are allowed on this site?
Drip irrigation, yes.
And that's the one.
Well, I mean, let's qualify this. I mean, we're going to have to go, or Toll Brothers is going to have to go through a permit and approval process. Drip irrigation is not a uncommon or some kind of prohibited system if that's what you're applying. I just don't know what you're, beyond that, I don't have any further way to enlighten you, I don't think, on that.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Yall, do you have any questions?
Not for this witness, but for probably Mr. Edelman, recognizing that he's not a witness.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Edelman, you replied to a question from one of the other parties that we have additional testimony related to the connecting to public sewer.
Yes, sir.
Are we going to hear from that type of testimony this evening from one of your other witnesses tonight, or is that something for a future hearing?
That would be this evening. Mr. Ebert will give some testimony on that topic.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, Mr. Edelman, any redirect?
I don't have any redirect at this time.
All right, well, it's 8 o'clock, so why don't we take about a 7-8 minute break here for our court reporter, and let's plan to come back at 8:07, 8:08, and we'll begin with the next witness. Thank you. Please, we're off the record. Please remember, ladies and gentlemen, to mute yourself because we can hear you and we can see what you're doing, so just be aware of that during the break, please. Eleanor, are you back yet?
I'm here, Pat. I'm good. Thank you.
You all set?
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, why don't we come back on the record, and Mr. Edelman, I'll ask you to call your next witness, please.
Thank you, Pat. At this time, I'd like to call Fred Ebert to testify. And I don't know if he's been added yet to the panel here.
I believe he has, and we'll have him sworn in.
Please.
I am here.
Mr. Ebert, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Fred. If you could please, for the record, state your business address and your full name.
My business address is 4397 Skipback Pike, Skipback, Pennsylvania. My name is Frederick E. Ebert.
Thank you. And Mr. Ebert, I'd like to show you what's been placed on the screen as previously marked as Exhibit A23. Is this a copy of your resume or curriculum vitae?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and are you a licensed or registered professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I'd like the board to take notice of Mr. Ebert's expert qualifications in wastewater engineering and permitting and ask him to be accepted as an expert in such fields. And I believe he was also previously accepted as an expert in the prior hearing on the Crebilly application.
Council have any objection?
No objection from the Township Planning Commission.
No objection from Thornbury Township.
No objection from Birmingham.
And again, Mr. Edelman, what is he being offered as an expert in?
Expert in wastewater engineering and permitting.
Okay, he will be so admitted.
Great, thank you. Fred, just by way of background, could you please again describe your involvement in Toll Brothers' proposed development?
Yes. I was brought in really for three main tasks. The first one was to identify a means of treatment for a community wastewater system located on the property. The second was to identify the means of wastewater, the disposal of the treated effluent from the wastewater treatment plant, and verify that there was the required capacity and that both systems could be permitted under the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection regulations. And the third thing was to do a feasibility analysis of conveying the proposed the wastewater that would generate from this site to the existing public sewer service, identify what upgrades would be required to the existing public sanitary sewer service infrastructure, as well as that capacity would be available at the West Goshen wastewater treatment plant, and to identify the required approvals both from an Act 537 planning aspect as well as a water quality management aspect for the public sewer option.
Great, thank you, Fred. I'd like to show you what was previously marked as Exhibit A24. Is this a copy of your wastewater engineering report for the property?
Yes, can you scroll down to the date? Yes, that was the previous one. Yes, that is correct.
Dated April 18, 2017, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you did testify in the prior hearing for the application, is that correct?
That is correct.
And what was your conclusion with respect to the feasibility of on-site wastewater treatment and disposal for the proposed development?
That there were means of treating it that could be permitted by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, and that there was adequate disposal capacity that could also be permitted and approved by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection.
Okay, and are you aware that since that first application, Toll has modified its conditional use plan?
I am aware of that fact.
Okay. I'd like to show you what I've marked as Exhibit A63. And could you identify this for the record?
Can you scroll down to the date? Yep. This is my updated expert report for the current land development plan that's part of this conditional use approval. It was updated for the number of units as well as additional soil testing that occurred from 2017 up through September of 2020.
Okay, and that report is dated September 10, 2020, is that correct?
That is correct.
In general, what type of wastewater treatment is being proposed to service the wastewater generated by this development?
It's what's known as advanced secondary. It's a biological treatment process. It's what's known as advanced secondary with denitrification. The key is that we're not only fully treating it from an organic standpoint, but we're also biologically removing the nitrogen and releasing it as a gas so that the soils only have to dispose of the treated effluent and are not required to do any additional treatment in order to meet the water quality management standards of having a total nitrogen level of less than 10 milligrams per liter at the property boundary.
Okay, and Fred, just generally, how is this type of treatment methodology implemented? What means are used in order to actually implement this treatment process?
As far as the means of the treatment process, wastewater will basically flow in, will be equalized so that diurnal variation is taken down. It will then flow through an aerobic process where the ammonia will be converted to nitrites. It will then go to an anoxic phase where the total nitrogen will be released as a gas down. It will then be disinfected. Will then go to a 3-day storage tank prior to being disposed of in a drip irrigation field.
Okay. And are there other methods of wastewater treatment that could be implemented on the site?
Yes.
Could you just go over those generally as well?
Okay. Well, obviously, there's individual on-lot units. There is a community system that we're proposing here, but there is also the option to convey the wastewater to the existing public sanitary sewer service area, where it would be conveyed through a proposed pump station, through an upgraded existing pump station, through an upgraded force main, ultimately to the West Goshen wastewater treatment plant, where Westtown Township is a partner and has purchased approximately 530,000 gallons of capacity at that existing treatment plant.
Okay, before we get into some of that in more detail, just going back to the proposed on-site wastewater treatment and disposal system, based on your knowledge and experience in wastewater treatment, do you have an opinion as to whether some of the methods you testified to would be approved by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection?
Yes, I do. I do believe that they would be approved and permitted by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. The basis of my opinion is that all three treatment technologies that I referenced in my report, I have personally designed, permitted, and are still operating in the state of Pennsylvania. And drip irrigation is very commonly approved. I have dozens of drip irrigation systems that are permitted and operating in the state of Pennsylvania.
Okay, thank you. And with respect to the drip disposal system, did you review GTA's letters and on-site wastewater reports?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and based on your knowledge in disposal, again, is your opinion, or do you have an opinion as to the suitability of the area as to being sufficient to handle the wastewater disposal needs of the proposed development?
Yes, I do. And what my opinion is that we need approximately 13 wetted acres in order to properly dispose of that. They have identified approximately 26.55 acres. The reality is that I need about 18 acres in order to net out 13 acres. The fact that I have 26 and not just 18 allows us to utilize the best areas and the best soils with the best drainage classifications, as well as the greatest distance to the existing seasonal high groundwater table. It also allows us to do a very efficient design where we can install the drip tubing on contour and don't have to cram things in. It provides plenty of room for the required manifolds, access, and monitoring wells. So we made sure that we had excess of area at this preliminary stage. But when I say this preliminary stage, there's been a significant amount of testing that's been done as far as soil classification. And there will be additional testing done throughout the approval process. And that if there is something that needs to be modified, we have the room. We are also spreading them out from the opposite corners of the property so that we're not stacking all of the wastewater in one area. That would lead to a higher amount or a failure in there from overloading it. So it's nicely spaced out away from the streams. That gives us plenty of options during the detailed design and permitting process of the land-based disposal, in this case, drip irrigation.
Thank you. Fred, is the proposed on-site wastewater treatment and disposal system consistent with the township's Act 537 plan for this property?
Yes. The current Act 537 plan for this property requires a community-based disposal system in this section of the township.
Okay, so I'd like to now show you what I believe was introduced by the township as Exhibit B as in boy 55. And this is a copy of an October 3rd, 2019 letter from Carroll Engineering Corporation. Fred, is Carroll Engineering the township's sewer engineer?
Yes, they are.
And have you met with the sewer engineer, the township sewer engineer, regarding potentially connecting this development to the township's public sewer system instead of doing an on-site system?
Yes, we met with them on January 22nd of 2020. I have also had significant follow-up conversations with Bill Malin on numerous times via telephone about this so that I had a clear understanding of what was required to connect to the public sewer system.
All right, is Bill Malin the township sewer engineer for Carroll Engineering?
Yes, he is. He's a client contact.
And does the October 3rd Carroll Engineering letter, Exhibit B55, accurately reflect your understanding of what needs to occur in order to connect this property to public sewer?
Yes, it does.
Okay. I'd like to show you what I've marked as Exhibit A64. And can you please explain for the board and the public what is depicted on Exhibit A64?
Yes, this is a plan that was prepared by myself in our office that depicts the route of the wastewater that will be generated on our site to the treatment system. So the wastewater that we generated on our site would generally flow in a southerly direction to a proposed pump station located on our site. It would then be pumped in a easterly direction along Street Road 926 over to Tower, I think it's Tower Center, Tower Course Drive, at which point the force main would discharge into the existing sanitary sewer system located in Tower Course